Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Matthew. Thank you very much for joining. Today we are finishing up our series on the Social Security Administration. What are the cash flows? What are the deficits? Is there any money in the trust fund? Two specific questions I've been asking throughout this series. Firstly, what does it mean when people say that Social Security is bankrupt? Is it true? And secondly, if it's not true, where is the money? All right, so without any further ado, let's wrap this up. See the prior 3 videos on this if you want more on the cash flows here. The green is the young paying for the old, which is the red, that is Social Security. If you take the net of these numbers every year, you're going to get a deficit or surplus that is here. You can see these purple bars. The deficit or surplus, we have been in deficit below zero since 2009, since the global financial crisis, and we are in a negative $150 billion territory as of fiscal year end 2023. Very simple economics of Social Security. How much is paid in social tax? How much is paid out in benefits? This is brass tacks. And then they say, well, don't worry, we have the trust fund to cover negative cash flows or operating losses or these deficits year to year. How much is that? That's here. $2.8 trillion at the moment as of fiscal year end 2023, September. And I backed into what this number actually meant because remember, this included cumulative interest over the years, all the years of the Social Security Trust Fund. So the way to find that is we took the cumulative surplus, which is simply adding up all of those deficits. Let's take off the benefits and the payroll tax. Just adding up all these purple bars throughout the 90 years of Social Security, 85 years or so of Social Security. Adding them up, you get this black dotted line. We only totaled about a trillion one in cash by 2009. And then, of course, we were in cash flow negative. So one interpretation is there is simply logically no savings from the prior surpluses of the last 85 years, and that has fully run out in 2020. But then they say, no, we have interest. This is an investment, the prior surpluses. So let's solve for that. Again, the Social Security number is the solid black line, the 2.8 trillion up top. Let's solve for that. Let's lift up my dotted line with an interest factor. The interest factor turns out to be 5.4% interest per year. So that's actually the value of the trust fund. We can back into that. Again, government numbers, they're going to have a different interest calculations. They're going to have a administration fee. They're going to even tax some of the Social Security numbers on the way out. All of that is on the margin. This is brass tacks. And the fund, this is essentially what that $2.8 trillion represents, backing into it a proper way. So let's take off my surplus numbers with interest. What we're left with. We're left with $150 billion of negative cash flow of a deficit in Social Security every year that the program is simply not funding. Young people are not able to afford older benefits for the older people from 2009. Okay? The baby boomers are retiring, continue to retire. Social Security ran a surplus most of the time for 70 years. In the last 15 years, it is running deficits. So finally, I've told you again and again in the prior videos, this solid dark line, what does that actually represent in value? It's simply money that is due from other branches of the government. Because what did other branches of the government do in the prior years when there was a surplus? All right, here, let's even take off the trust fund. These years, 1945, 55, there you see there's $1 billion, maybe $1.7 billion, maybe 750 million in surplus. You add all these up over the years, you get to the trust fund assets with interest, okay? And again, a little bit of a goofy calculation by the government. This is the government figure here. But nonetheless, what is actually happening during these periods where there are surpluses? The government is spending the money immediately. Not the Social Security Administration, it's not needing it, but the military, the FDA, the EPA, transportation, any other branch of government, Veterans Affairs, is immediately taking any excess cash that there is in the government and spending it. That's all government does. It taxes and it spends. So That's what this trust fund represents. It represents an asset due from other agencies in the government, other branches in the government, be it the military, be it the FDA, be it whomever, it doesn't matter. Taking a moment to remind you that this show is brought to you by Trezor, home of the original Bitcoin hardware wallet. For over 10 years now, Trezor means business in Bitcoin security and functionality. When using their wallet software Trezor Suite to connect to the Bitcoin network, you're automatically connected via Tor, protecting your identity and giving you full control of your coins in a fully open source manner, both on the software level and on the hardware level. So head on over to Trezor.io to grab your brand new Trezor Safe 5 with a secure element, as well as a ton of available accessories to back up your keys and keep your coins safe. And so what I want to do for the rest of this video then is to further drill down on why this asset from other branches of the government in the United States' case is not an asset at all. It's an accounting fiction. There's no there there. There's no money there. It simply is going to have to be paid with new taxes in the name of Social Security. It means any deficits are going to be taxed twice. And how can I prove this? Very simply, let's look at another nation's sovereign wealth fund, another nation's pension fund. That is Norway. Norway, a country of 6 million people, somewhat famously discovered a lot of oil in the North Sea in the 1960s. And from about the 1960s to the 1990s, they were working at it, building up their infrastructure, becoming very rich in the process. They had too much money they didn't know what to do with. They decided, let's make a pension fund for our people. And that started in the 90s, and there is a balance publicly available on the Norges Bank, the central bank of Norway, on their website. I'm going to paint that in blue here. Not as big as the Social Security Trust Fund, but you see what is inside of this safe here, dollar value. This is the relative dollar value of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. Remember, there are 7 million people in Norway. We are comparing with 330 million people in the United States, many millions more if you count immigration. The United States Social Security Trust Fund has a balance of 2.8 trillion. Norway, 1.38 trillion, $1.4 trillion. So what is the crucial difference here then between the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund in blue and the Social Security Trust Fund, the black line, as according to the Social Security Administration? Well, besides that it's a very large number for a very small country, which is amazing, again, the blue shaded area are assets, real investments by the Norwegian people into real companies. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund has invested into about 9,000 companies over the years. The return is actually 6.3%. 6.3% growth for this blue area. Okay, if you just want to get to one number that standardizes this growth at 6.3%. Whereas I told you the effective return of Social Security is 5.4%. But again, it's not real assets there. But so it's even outperforming whatever the United States government says they're performing at. Real shareholder wealth for the Norwegian people. Real value. They have invested into the likes of Apple, Microsoft, Samsung, Nestle, plenty of oil companies as well. And of course, they're trying to go more green in recent years, as everybody is. But make no mistake, oil is the fundamental foundation of this fund. Statoil, a big Norwegian company. Plenty of oil funds in here as well, oil companies that they're invested in. But if you were to go into the shareholders register of Apple, Nestle, Microsoft, you would find a line item, shares owned by the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. Real assets. That is real shareholder value. That means that this blue shaded area will pay dividends each year coming from those companies which are producing real goods and real services. The makeup of it is not important, okay? Whether it's oil, whether it's electronics, whether it's consumer goods, it's not important. The point is, Norway's sovereign wealth fund is a real sovereign wealth fund. And it is huge, by the way, 1.3 trillion, 1.4 trillion as of last year. This year and last year, it's even bigger now. A little bit bigger, I can say. Quite a bit bigger even. Should be getting close to 2 trillion, in fact, if it hasn't already. That value is locked up in real companies. It's going to come from real dividends, real investments. There are not too many. In fact, this is really one of the most unique sovereign wealth funds in the world. My understanding is some of the Arab countries have them as well, of course, spearheaded by oil. But Norway was really a pioneer in this area, and it's totally different than Social Security. Because I will say it again, what is the there of Social Security? What is the money that's sitting in this $2.8 trillion of the United States Social Security Administration? It is a claim on the cash flows of the military, or the cash flows of the FDA, or the cash flows of the Transportation Authority. And if the Social Security Administration wanted to say, hey, we're running a $150 billion shortfall this year, we need you to pay up for all the money that we lent you over the years, what are those branches of government going to tell Social Security? Sorry, step in line like the rest of us. We can't even fund our own budgets without a deficit. And how do we know that? We know that because the United States runs a budget deficit of trillions of dollars a year, has a national debt close to $40 trillion a year, liabilities actually over $40 trillion a year. There is no there. Social Security, to fund these new $150 billion deficits that Social Security has run since 2009, it must take in new tax dollars. That is the only source of income to cover Social Security. New tax dollars. There are no savings. There is no bank account. There is no money in any companies like Apple stock or Amazon stock or Microsoft stock. It is only from tax money. And therefore, every time you see a deficit in Social Security, every time you see these purple candles go negative, that is money that must be taxed twice in the name of Social Security. Doesn't matter that Social Security has this huge surplus plus imaginary interest that it had accreted over 80 years, 90 years of existence. That money was already spent by the military, by transportation, on the roads, by the FDA. I'm not disputing that there's not some value in the government there. Some people, more anarcho-capitalists, would even argue with that. But there's no excess money. There's no dividends from those companies, they're not companies, of course, from those branches of government to pay back Social Security. It must come from new taxes. This is the net of Social Security. There is no other way. There's no other revenue stream that could possibly fund these deficits of $150 billion a year. And when it says on the Social Security books that actually this hole is being plugged by interest income, you have to understand that is an accounting fiction. That is simply new debt, new deficits that the United States government is taking on itself because there is no other positive cash flowing entity or branch of the government. This is how it works. Norway, a country of less than 10 million people, has a sovereign wealth fund of real assets for its people, which is going to pay dividends for generations into the future in perpetuity, as long as general commerce continues. Of course, the fund managers can't completely screw this up, but if they're going to keep this growing at 5-6% a year, they're going to keep up with the rest of Norwegian population growth, world economy, even in bouts of inflation that their country deals with. They have real assets, real shareholder value, real dividends that are getting paid inside of this blue shaded area. Inside of that hollow black line, the trust fund assets of Social Security, there are liabilities due from other branches of government. And again, that can only be plugged by new taxes, and thus every time you see a cash flow negative, a deficit in the Social Security Administration, that must be funded by new taxes. New taxes, there are not enough in the federal government. That means new deficits. That means a new national debt. It is money that effectively is taxed twice in the name of Social Security. So, to summarize, Social Security, you could argue, has been bankrupt since 2009. It cannot fund itself. Then if you want to talk about the going concern of the trust fund, there's no money there. It only comes from new deficits. So again, there's really no money there. And if you want to talk about what really was book value accumulated, that already went negative in 2020. But again, it doesn't matter whether you look at my dotted line or the Social Security official black line. These things are accounting fiction. There are not real assets there. What is a real thing, which would be amazing for the American people, even if it was $1 trillion less, would be the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund having wealth tied up as a shareholder register item, actually being a shareholder of different companies that are active in the marketplace, producing real goods, producing real services, and paying dividends to their shareholders, of which the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is a large one in 9,000 companies around the world. That is the summary of Social Security. Running a $150 billion deficit a year only can come from new taxes, new deficits, new debt of the government. That's it. That's the only way this deficit can be plugged, not through any shareholder value or any asset value of any company, because the United States government does not have that set up like the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund does. That's the summary of Social Security. Hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we will continue with a different series in the next video. Thanks for watching.